Hi friends, welcome to A Gray Barn Rising. Glad you could join me. I'm having a cup of Silver Needle white tea and sitting here with best hound dog in the world, Bootsy Beagle. I'm reading the poems this evening of the great Spanish poet Vicente Aleixandre. Vicente Aleixandre was born in 1898 and he left the body in 1984. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1977, and still he's not as well known as he possibly could be. It blows my mind when I think about the magnitude of his verse. He was a poet of the generation of 27, along with Federico Garcia Lorca, Miguel Hernandez, Pedro Salinas, and a host of other really fine poets, including Rafael Alberti and others. Unlike most of those poets, he was not killed during the war, nor did he go into exile because he had severe health problems. He actually turned to poetry in 1917. He had discovered the great Nicaraguan modernist Rubén Darío, and he became fascinated with verse at that time. In 1922, he actually became ill, though, seriously ill, and retreated to a mountain village, and there began writing poetry very seriously. And he had relapses of illness, particularly tuberculosis, up through the war, and he was very ill during the first 2 years of the Spanish Civil War. So he was not deemed a threat, really, by the Falangist government, the Franco government, and he was able to stay in Spain without being persecuted. He went into a kind of inner exile, always maintaining his democratic principles, and actually became a mentor for a new generation of poets, including Blas de Otero and others. His deep influences, I mentioned Rubén Darío, but they also were the Spanish poets of the generation of what we call the generation of 98, and that's the generation of 1898, Antonio Machado and Juan Ramón Jiménez. So I'm going to be reading some of the poems of Vicente Aleixandre today. They're absolutely startling in their surrealism, in their animal energy, and in what I would call a kind of dark luminosity. They are not depressing or sad poems, but there is a great light that wells up from deep within the unconscious, and they move in rather startling, primitive ways. There are several wonderful translations of Aleixandre. This is a beautiful book. This is one of his earliest books, Destruction or Love, and this was brought out in a beautiful art edition several years ago with paintings or drawings and his work. Of course, there's Shadow of Paradise and many others, including the two that I'm going to be reading from this evening. Willis Barnstone also translated A Bird of Paper, which was another important Vicente Aleixandre translation. The first Vicente Aleixandre book I came to was nearly 35 years ago, and it was a small book brought out by Robert Bly's 70s Press, and this is 20 poems of Vicente Aleixandre. This was brought out in 1977, translated by Lewis Hyde, edited by Lewis Hyde, and translated by Lewis Hyde and Robert Bly. Lewis Hyde went on to edit and translate many of the poems in A Longing for the Light, which is a more substantial version of the poems of Vicente Aleixandre. These are my two particular favorites. Lewis Hyde, you may know, he's well known for his great critical work, The Gift, Imagination, and the Erotic Life of Property, which if you don't have that book as a sidelight, run out and get it. It's a great book about consciousness and about poetic consciousness. So I'm going to begin this evening by reading Robert Bly translation of this poem titled The Body and the Soul. But it is sadder than that, much, much sadder. Sad as a branch letting its fruit fall for no one. Sadder, much sadder, like the mist the dead fruit breathes out from the ground. Like this hand that rises from the corpse lying in state and merely wants to touch the lamps. The grieving smile, the night speechless and velvet. Luminous night above the corpse stretched out without its soul. The soul outside the body, swooping with such delicacy over the shape, sad and abandoned. Soul of soft mist held floating above its former lover, the defenseless and pale body, which grows colder as the night goes on. It remains silent, alone, empty in a gentle way. Soul of love that watches and hesitates to free itself, but finally leaves, gentle and cold. The Comet. This is a Lewis Hyde translation. Its long hair is a sad thing. It must not last as long as the stars. So thoughtful. And it flies off. It flies off like the comet, like Halley's Comet when I was a child. A child watches and believes. He sees the trailing tail, and what he sees are the holy robes of a comet that was hoisted into the sky by a child. But it's the grown-up who's skeptical. Now he can see the sky cut through with bright lights. He'll never believe. He smiles. Only later he believes. Again. He sees shadows. He can see black things inside his white hair and believes. All of the blind are blind, and he believes. He believes in all the black cloth that his fingers touched. That's the way it is with children and men. The man has his doubts. The old man knows. Only the child understands. They all watch the brilliant, circling tail. This is another Hyde translation. Man doesn't exist. Only the moon suspects the truth, and it's that man doesn't exist. The moon feels its way over the fields and crosses the rivers. It probes into the woods. It gives a shape to the still, warm mountains. It runs into the heat from built-up cities. It forms a shadow and kills a dark corner, and its flashing roses flood the mystery of the caves where there is no odor. The moon chants a tune and understands and moves and goes on without stopping. An ocean isn't a bed where a man's body can stretch out all alone. An ocean isn't a shroud to cover a shining death. The moon keeps going. It scratches and soaks and sinks into the packed sand. It gives the calm green murmurs an incredible motion. A corpse stands up and sways for a moment. He wavers and then goes on. He stops, green and still. The moon alters his broken arms, his stern gaze where some fish are nestling. The moon sets fire to the sunken cities where you can still hear, how pleasing, the clear bells, where the last ripples still echo over the neuter breasts, over the soft breasts that some octopus has worshipped. But the moon is always pure and dry. It comes from an ocean that's always a container, that's a block of stone whose limits no one can cut down. An ocean that isn't a rock glowing on top of a mountain. The moon comes out and chases what used to be a man's bones, what used to be his blood vessels, what used to be his sonorous blood, his prison full of songs his visible waist that divides life, or his light head going east on the wind. But man doesn't exist. He has never existed. Never. But man doesn't live, as the day doesn't live. But the moon invents his furious metals. I talked about Alexandre's surrealism and the ways that it seems to go very deeply into his unconscious and almost animalistic ways, primeval ways. And so much of his imagery will deal with oceans and octopuses and the inky, dark depths of the unconscious. And I just really love that about his work. It enters that space where the human and the primeval exist together. I want to close this evening with a poem that Timothy Beland has translated. Timothy Beland, viewers of this program may remember as the great translator of Miguel Hernandez. Timothy Beland, his translation is included in this Lewis Hyde book, A Longing for the Light, and this is a little poem entitled Mother, Mother, again of Vicente Aleixandre. Sadness, or a hollow in the earth, gently dug through force of words, through force of thoughts about the sea, where frail rowboats float at the mercy of the waves. Rowboats frail like the birds at mating time, like digits filled with love, like that final longing to kiss the shore goodbye, or the painful footprint of a hermit, or a footstep gone astray. Sadness like a well in the water, a dry well that forces the sands breathing deeper. A well. Mother, are you listening? You're the soft mirror where a seagull can feel warmth or feather. Mother, mother, I'm calling you, my own quiet mirror, sweet, opened smile like a piece of cut glass. Mother, mother, this hurt. Mother, this hand someone touched is a well opened in the chest, or confusion. Sadness doesn't always blossom as a flower, nor the flower grow enough to overtake the air, to spout. Mother, are you listening to me? I'm the one who wears love's heart here on the outside like wire. So those are a few poems of Vicente Aleixandre, the Spanish poet. I read this evening from 20 poems of Vicente Aleixandre, as well as A Longing for the Light, the selected poems of Vicente Aleixandre. His work is immense, and there's so much more that is there to explore. As I said, he's a Nobel laureate, and unfortunately so few people are aware of his work. I think it's extraordinarily deep and rewarding, and I strongly encourage you to seek out more.